I obviously can't cover all of Queen Elizabeth's Ascot hats as she has worn so many. In fact, if I've done the maths correctly, I estimate Her Late Majesty had attended just under 370 days of Ascot. That's a whopping collection of almost 370 hats worn to the Ascot races. I cannot even visualize such a large number in hats. Hello and welcome to a millinery hat style video. My name is Ilona, I'm a milliner based in London, and today, because you asked for it, I will be looking at Queen Elizabeth II's hats that she wore to the Royal Ascot races. And we'll jump straight into the year 1987 when the late Queen wore this little hat with an upswept brim that comes to a point at the side. I am not sure exactly how to categorize this hat. On the one hand, you could say it's a brimmed pillbox, or maybe you could call it a percher. Either way, it's rather pretty. The colour of the crown matches the colour of Her Late Majesty's coat, and the brim is in a contrasting ivory colour. It's got a double-folded beige veil that covers the brim, and that little upturned peak is what gives this shape an extra flare of interest. This hat from 1991 also features an upswept peak in the brim. This is a very 90s style hat. The crown is covered in the same floral fabric as the dress and the brim matches the coat. Notice how you can see the crown poking out from under the brim. This is quite a common design feature of hats with angled brims. It provides a sturdy base for the brim and means that the hat is well balanced and more secure to the head. It also facilitates lifting the brim off the face, which is very important in royal hats so that the crowds can see the monarch. I myself have experimented with this style of hat. As you can see, the crown is poking out from underneath. The bow is pink, just like the Queen's hat. As we move into the mid-90s, we start to see a shift in the late Queen's hat styles. It's the classic big crown and big brim, shown here with some 90s design flair in the form of chiffon half bows. I really like the volume this trimming has created around the crown. It's reminiscent of big Edwardian hats. It's 1999 and cinnamay has found its way into millinery. If you don't know what cinnamay is, it's a fibre that comes from the abaca tree, which is a species of banana native to the Philippines. In this hat, I think it's evident that milliners hadn't quite figured out how to use it in an elegant, refined way. You can see in this brim it has only been used in 1 or 2 layers. These days it's used in 3 or 4. You can also see that the weave is wonky and hasn't been straightened out before use. Notice how in the crown the strands of cinnamay are bunching up into the trim. This is because cinnamay comes as a flat sheet of material, and stretching it over the curves of a taller crown can be quite difficult. Today, a more refined way to work with cinnamay is to create a crown using a tip and sideband method, but we'll get into these hats in due course. On a more positive observation about this hat in particular, I think the lovely classic blue colour suited Queen Elizabeth very well, and I like the use of the contrasting white stripped cockerel feathers. Jumping forwards in time, by 2008, milliners had figured out more elegant ways with cinnamay. In this hat by Philip Somerville, a bias window pane cinnamay is used layered on top of a parasisal straw brim. It adds a little bit of texture to this brim, which would otherwise look very plain. The trim here is also made out of cinnamay. Notice how this weave is now much tighter on account of it being pulled on the bias to stretch the fibres closer together. In 2009, we can see the same window pane cinnamay on another Philip Somerville model. This time it is by itself as an upturned brim. I think when cinnamay is used on the bias like this, it is rather exquisite, as is the lace along the straw crown with a doupion bow and a long cut feather that follows the line of the brim edge. This hat was just so lovely on Her Late Majesty. This pinky purple colour also suited the late Queen very well. This is a woven straw hat with a tall flat crown and a slight Breton brim. This kind of brim was always quite a popular choice for the late Queen, as it keeps it off her face so that the crowds can see her. And I would like to draw your attention to the delicate little jewel hat pin. I think it is very elegant. In 2001, the late Queen wore this 2-colour hat with a white brim and a crown covered in blue veiling. I'd like to point out here that traditionally in millinery, this kind of material is always referred to as baling and should never be called netting. Netting describes a class of materials used as foundations to hats, such as buckram, Paris net, cape net, and maline. This hat from 2002 stood out to me for its outstanding craftsmanship. I haven't been able to find out who made this one, but I would love to know because this work is fantastical. This is a fabric-covered hat with what looks to me to be an Oxford weave cloth. The brim and sideband fabrics are of course cut on the bias, and there is an interesting bit of piping along the sideband to tip join. Now look closely at that diagonal line dividing the darker colour from the lighter colour. The matching up of the seams is incredible. This would have taken so much careful work and attention to detail in the pattern making. This bucket style seems to have been a popular choice for Her Late Majesty in the early 2000s. Let's have a quick fire round and look at 3 other examples from 2003, 4 and 8 with a similar silhouette. The 2003 model is a combination of a white straw crown and a yellow fabric covered brim. In this case, the brim didn't need a lining because its base is a yellow straw. I think this is a very clever combination and the design plays with differences in texture very successfully. The bucket silhouette is balanced out with a delicate quill and a feather trim. The 2004 model is a white straw with an exaggerated pork pie crown. I think this is such an interesting crown shape which flatters Her Late Majesty very well. I also really like the arrangement of daisies around the crown. It makes the hat look light and very summery. In 2008, Queen Elizabeth wore this Ricciello braid hat. Ricciello is a Swiss braid primarily made out of a viscose fibre. It is shiny in appearance, flexible to work with, and makes a fun, crispy sound. 2006 saw the introduction of hats made for the late Queen by milliner Rachel Trevor Morgan. Rachel was granted a royal warrant in 2014. All of these hats that I have picked out are made out of cinnamon and feature Rachel's signature silk flowers. This chartreuse hat and this purple hat are both overlaid with a waffle cinnamon. The waffle gives these hats some extra texture and adds to the complexity of their appearance. The butter yellow and turquoise blue hats are made using the tip and sideband method for the crown. This method is typically used when the crown is rather tall or has an interesting shape. The tip is just a flat piece of layered cinnamon and the sideband is formed from a bias strip also in several layers. I think this gives the crowns a much neater appearance compared to what we've seen before when the cinnamon was blocked. As for the trims, I have already mentioned Rachel's signature silk flowers. On the yellow hat, the lilies are paired with goose bio feathers, and on the turquoise, the roses are paired with cut, spiky arrowhead goose or turkey feathers. In 1994, Angela Kelly became the Queen's dresser. Alongside milliner Stella McLaren, they designed and made hats for Queen Elizabeth for many years. On this yellow creation, the blue hydrangeas are brought out in the late Queen's dress. And on these 2 hats, clearly the same peaked brim block has been used to form a very interesting shape. The powder blue hat has been trimmed with silk and velvet roses, while the seafoam one has cinnamon rolled edge roses and leaves. I hope you have all liked the Ascot hats of Her Late Majesty. I think that the hats worn to the Epsom Derby are also quite interesting, so leave me a comment if you'd like to learn more about those. Thank you so much for watching, liking and subscribing. See you next time. Bye.